Hi everybody, thanks a million for tuning in today. I'm so delighted to be joined by Dr. Awan. Alweena, thanks a million for joining us.
Great to be here.
So Alweena, I know obviously in a personal capacity, but also is an education consultant. So lots of different tips and advice and tricks that she'll have for us today. And more importantly as well, she'll be sharing with us her own personal story, which will give lots of viewers a great deal of insights. I myself, my name is Buckley, so I run a business that's called Blossom for Life that provides online tuition for people with learning difficulties, mainly dyslexia and a broad range of other learning difficulties. So today we're going to have a mix of topics, kind of a mixed bag for everybody, depending upon what age or demographic you are. So we'll kind of kick off initially. Alweena, so maybe you can give us a bit of an outline, a bit of background to your own story, and we'll go from there.
Right, so interestingly, I myself didn't know I was dyslexic till I was 46 years old. And it was only at that age when I started doing my PhD that I've kind of had a realization, and because I was struggling with a lot of things. And because of all my experience with dyslexia and children who have issues learning, and my own research that I did on holistic ways of helping children, I realized that at that point, my brain was at its highest capacity for learning. So it could only do the learning, it couldn't do the spelling, it couldn't do the sentence construction. But it was okay because I managed to get through that because I could find somebody else to do the spelling for me and the editing. So that was how, when I really found out I was dyslexic. However, if I go back, then I started thinking about my own journey and I started looking back at what was going on with me. And I realized that while I was doing my O-levels and my GCSEs and my A-levels, I was actually really struggling. So I kind of felt smart, but it never showed on paper. And I did pretty badly with my GCSEs and my A-levels. The one thing I really loved was physical activity. And even by A-level, by the age I was about 17, 18, I knew I wanted to be a PE teacher. So I managed to get myself into a PE college, but my grades were so low that it was in 79, 78, I was only put on the certificate course. And I wasn't allowed to go on the degree course because I wasn't, judged to be bright enough or capable enough. And interestingly, so on the degree course, you did lots of theory because it was deemed you could do that and you were able to do that. But on the certificate course, you did lots of activity. So 3 hours in the morning theory, but 3 hours in the afternoon doing physical activity. And that was pretty well, 7 days a week, really. Oh. At the end of that year, I started to do so well that they actually took me up and put me in the degree group. So the only thing that really changed was the amount of physical activity I was doing and, all sorts of different activities. So that was the only thing that had changed. So I've kind of really been interested in the power or how physical literacy affects learning. And that was what my research was on.
Fabulous. And as you mentioned, kind of going back to a school pattern, are there any kind of main events or main kind of situations that you thought, Alweena, like you were like, something kind of just isn't sitting well, was there any kind of spellings or any particular tests or any ongoing learning that you thought this just isn't all adding up anymore?
Well, do you know what? I never thought it wasn't like that for me. And because of my experience with a wide range of children and my research, it shows up differently for some people. So, for example, for myself, it was only when I started teaching that I was thinking to myself, oh, this is awful. I'm standing here writing these spellings at the board, and often I'd misspell something. So it was that when I started teaching, I started to realize there's something not right here. Why can't I spell? And I have a son actually who's dyslexic as well. And having gone through and did research and worked with dyslexic children, it was only when he was 17 that I found out that he was dyslexic. Because he didn't have the normal, there's a certain criteria, but some people, it's not like that for some people. So he loved reading. He was very bright. So if you have a very, very, it's like having a really bright computer, it can handle quite a lot. And then it starts to break down with other things. So he was like that. He was able to read, able to, although I noticed that he didn't like writing things down. So he preferred to do things in his head, like maths equations, and just get the answer. And so it was only when he was 17 that when he was trying to learn to drive a car and he couldn't work out how to turn left or right, I thought, oh, this is a bit odd. And then I started to get suspicious. And then he said to me, I can't tell the time on an analog clock. And I thought, oh dear. So I had him tested and he was at age 17. So for some people, it just comes up in different ways. A lot of people think, oh, they can't spell or they can't write or they can't do this. It's so different and vast and varied.
Massive. Yeah, it's and such a fascinating and so valuable point, because we get constant questions as to, oh, is it related only just to spelling or reading or writing? And there's so many different forms with maths or with handwriting. Spelling could be relatively okay. My spelling was never actually majorly below par. It was definitely an interpreting of information from a page into my brain, let's say, to learn off for a test. So there's lots of different forms and strands, and I suppose that's what makes it such a complex area from a teaching capacity, that no two people really have the same level of learning difficulty or the same level of learning, regardless of it being a difficulty or not. Each person learns in a different format. And that's why I suppose having kind of an all-inclusive environment from a teaching context is really, really important.
Absolutely. I mean, what I started doing when I started teaching, and I think I got into about my 16th year of teaching, I got very interested in using physical activity. And the moment I got really interested in teaching, in sort of trying to find different ways of helping children, was I was asked, I was in a school that there were 5 parallel classes, and somebody said to me, actually it was the head teacher, she said, why is it that your children can always read? And I thought to myself, well, what is it that I do that actually that why does that happen? And the only conclusion I could come to was that I do lots of physical activity. I used to do PE nearly every single day with the children. And then from that, I went on to start seeing if there was anything in that. And then I ended up doing some research on using 2 things actually. And now looking back, those, if you look at markers for a dyslexia, you will see these 2 things. So what I did was I researched whether developing a child's physical literacy by integrating their retained reflexes helped children to learn, and whether addressing their auditory processing helps children to learn. So if we look at dyslexia, we know that there's a lot of children who have problems with speech. They have problems with deciphering the sound. They have problems with phonics. So here we've got all auditory processing type of problems. So there was addressing the auditory processing. And then on the other side, a lot of children who are dyslexic, they seem to go 2 ways. Either really like sports and activities, or actually just don't like them at all. So myself, I really loved sports and activities, and inadvertently that helped me to where I am now. But when my middle son was dyslexic, doesn't like that, doesn't like sports or activity in that way. He just likes to walk. And having done the research, I totally can understand now why that is. So my main expertise is in physical literacy. So that was what my research was. Can enabling a child's physical literacy, generally I was looking at it, help their learning. But what I began to notice was that physical literacy has a huge role to play with children who are dyslexic. So for example, the sense of balance, how well a child balances, has a huge impact on how well they read. So if you take a group of children that are dyslexic, you will note that their sense of balance is off. And it's a very simple test. Get a young child, say from 7 years to 12, stand on one leg, and they should really be able to stand on one leg for 15 seconds and the other leg for 15 seconds. Now you think, that's going to tell you how well they read, but actually, yes, because what happens is we get astronauts who are the best of the brains, and then they go off into space, and when they lose their sense of gravity, so that they lose their sense of balance, they actually have something called space dyslexia. So they begin to mirror write and reverse letters. So this is what we see in dyslexia. And what happens is when they come back, they have to learn how to rebalance. And then when they're balanced, that seems to go away. So there was a guy called Dorr who found out that his daughter was dyslexic, and he found out that just by improving a child's sense of balance, it helps their reading. It doesn't mean it helps them to read, because you still have to do the remediation. But what you're doing is giving them the opportunity to be able to learn to read. You still have to teach the reading, but they're able now. It's like the equipment is working properly. So for dyslexic children, you'll find that physical literacy is poor, that balance is often poor, and that's why you'll see a lot of dyslexic children, they also are dyspraxic. And one of the things is that physical literacy is absolutely vital for literacy. So physical literacy allows the brain to do what the brain needs to do. And it helps the body to move in a fluent way, and that helps because young children and adults, we just kind of learn through our body. So it's really important that body is physically literate, and physical literacy actually underpins literacy, and that's what my research showed. Because if we look at the area of the brain where all movement happens, that's the cerebellum. So originally we thought that, okay, the cerebellum is just interested in a sense of balance and coordination. But there's new paradigm now, and new research is showing that the cerebellum is interested in learning, in planning, in judging time, and in some educational cognitive disorders and mental activity. So if we look at in planning, a lot of dyslexic children have issues planning or organizing or getting even an essay planned out. It's not that they can't write the essays, they can actually don't have not able to plan it. So that's the planning aspect of it. Judging time, you'll see a lot of dyslexic, the adults even, like everybody, there's an issue with time. Either they discipline themselves to be on time, or they're often off time, or they'll think they've got more time. And there's procrastination and stuff that goes on. A lot of dyslexic children have remember in the cerebellum part, there's also the mental, emotional activities going on. They have low self-esteem and low confidence. Now, this all comes from that part of the brain that actually is trying to sort out physical literacy. But if we just look at one aspect, which is actually balance, because as human beings, we are the only animal that are constantly fighting gravity, like we're trying to stay upright. So balance is kind of really important for us. And if we don't have a really good sense of balance, then what begins to happen is that, firstly, we're not very confident in our body.
Yeah.
And then if we're not confident in our own body, that has an effect on our self-confidence. So balance affects us in that way. The other way that the balance affects us is that it gives us a reference point in relation to the rest of the world. And that reference point is really important because it gives us a sense of, if there is danger, I know where I am in relation to this and I can make a quick getaway. Now, if you are kind of not confident in that, that affects your self-confidence. So it's part of the brain then goes into the survival mode of, am I going to topple over, or am I, so it's when a brain is in survival mode, it can't use all its capacity to learn. So there's that going on. So that has an emotional impact, but also the fact that your sense of balance is out has an impact on your whole body, and then it has an impact on your eyes. And so it's almost as if the eyes are working in a moving camera. So then you will have children who find it hard to copy from a blackboard, who will not be able to track properly. So all sorts of issues going on with the eyes. So it's not that the brain can't function, it's the brain's not functioning, it's the fact that the eyes are not interpreting the messages correctly. Mm-hmm. So balance is so important for the sensory information that comes into the body. So that can be off. So one of the things is, if we're then saying balance is this important, well, start doing something about the balance.
Completely, yeah, really, really important. I think you taught us loads of nuggets and wisdom there, Alweena. We had loads of various different points to follow up on, of how we process information and how we deal with things, as you mentioned, between the fight or flight and a normal cognitive state of learning. Really, really vital for lots of people to be aware about how we learn in different environments and different states, and eye tracking movement and all of those type of things. But I suppose mainly really we want to look at as well, so that was your element that you picked up on, both from your personal experience and through dealing with the kids, and then from a program perspective. So you have obviously done an awful lot of research and work into this area and generated a program to kind of address this topic. So maybe we talk a bit more about how we go best about finding that information.
Yeah, well, first of all, actually, the program in itself is almost common sense. What happens is that we have started. So one of the things that is affects physical literacy is retained primitive reflexes, and if the primitive reflexes aren't actually integrated, that has an effect on the development of the child, the physical aspect of the development of the child.
And will you give us an example of, let's say, for people that mightn't be aware of what those type of reflexes might be?
Right, well, an example is the ATNR reflex, and 50% of children have a problem. 50% of children who have dyslexia have an ATNR reflex. Mm-hmm. And so if I can give you an example of an ATNR reflex, is that so for example, writing, okay? So the child who has an ATNR reflex has an inability to cross the midline. And so you'll see these children writing in a slant. And so it has an effect not on just writing, but it has an effect on the coordination of the body. So the child is functioning in a homolateral way, not in a cross-lateral way. So the motor reflex has a load of, so if I can give you how the eyes function in a motor reflex environment in a classroom, for instance, if a child has a motor reflex that's not integrated, they will be in fight and flight because they'll feel as if there's an attack going on. And if the body is feeling that, the eyes will be only functioning at a peripheral level because the body needs to scan. So you'll hear a teacher keep saying to the child, look at me when I'm, talking to you. And we also know that we need to look at somebody or something to be able to focus. But the child's eyes will naturally be wandering around the classroom because this primitive reflex is saying there might be some danger. So the child is not able to focus completely on that. So if there's a noise outside, for instance, or a pencil drops at the back, at that moment, the child will react, turn around, look at the back. And if the teacher is giving some instruction, the child will now lose that instruction, comes back to it, and now the child is completely lost. So this is how retained primitive reflexes can affect. Now, why aren't they actually integrated? Well, that's to do with the fact that we are not putting our children down on the ground enough. We're using too much equipment. They're in car seats too long. They're in push chairs, high chairs too long. When they're not going through the normal developmental stages of lots of activity. So what kind of activity are we talking about? Just like tumbling, rolling, hanging upside down, climbing, swinging, all of these activities, any activity where a child is going round and round in this motion or round and round in this motion or up on a height is all developing their balance. And that actually is all sorting out their reading. So if you want a child to, so when I did my research, that's what I was doing. At that point, I didn't know, but I was actually sorting out their balance, and that was helping their reading. So the program that I looked at and ended up actually creating is called Simple. And the reason it's called Simple is twofold. One, because it's a simple program, sensory integration movement program for learning enhancement. Simple. It really is just normal stages of things that children would be doing, jumping, running, tumbling. But one of the most important aspects for children is crawling. So children who have retained primitive reflexes won't have crawled in the normal way. And in this program, there is the therapeutic element of crawling. So if you have a child that is struggling, get them to start doing lots of crawling. Doesn't matter what age they are. The way it works is it can impact you at any age. It impacted me when I went to PE college. Because I ended up doing a program in a way without knowing, and look what it did for my brain. It enabled me to be able to learn more.
Fabulous.
So it kind of took me towards achieving my full potential. How? Not by doing more of reading, not by breaking down more of reading, not by learning spelling, but actually developing sequential activity in the body. Because if you develop physical literacy, if you develop the way that the body is able to move sequentially, then that goes into an abstract way. So for example, a child who has difficulty doing their times table, go and develop simple exercises in a sequential way, and that will actually enable them to sort out the abstract sequential processing.
Really, really important, like the sequencing aspect, and how we, again, all learn differently, but then there's some core principles that we all need to come back to, you know, from a developmental perspective. There's some core milestones and I suppose landmarks that we all need to meet, and again, mightn't always be there either in people with learning difficulties or in people with any strand or I suppose walk of life. And we will put up the links to Alweena's website for people to learn more information or where they can get other helpful tips and resources. But any advice really, Alweena, that you think people either at home or in a classroom perspective could be doing in the next maybe few weeks to months to try and help in this area?
Yeah, well, my advice really from 4 years of research at PhD level, the government, to parents, to teachers, was get them outside, get them moving. It doesn't have to be the simple program. It can be just normal activities. The way a playground is set up with the swinging and the climbing and all of that is actually just doing a program. But if you want to kind of push them through quickly, then the way the simple program is set up is it includes it. It's like a compact program. But honestly, just get your child out. Just do a little check what their balance is like. I mean, there's other checks you can do, but just that one simple check. And what you're trying to do is to make sure that their balance is good, they've got a good reference, and if their balance is good, the way their eyes will function will be good as well. And then they'll be able to track the words on a page, because, you know, teachers don't ask the child, what are you seeing on the page? Dyslexic children might be seeing the page, the letters moving around, rolling around, shadows. That's because the balance is out, and it's like a moving camera. The eyes are functioning as a moving camera. Simple, very simple things that can be done for the body will enable a child to be able to access the information. And if I can just finish with one thing, I had a 15-year-old who came to me because I also work as was working as a one-to-one therapist at the time, and he was having problems reading, and we actually did some holistic ways of holistic therapy, but also the simple program. And he came back to me and he said to me, now I put the book down when I want to, not when my eyes are tired. So just nothing to do with the brain. Didn't have to teach him to learn to read, nothing. We just had to make sure that his eyes were functioning properly and picking the words off the book.
Really, really important. Like, it's such a common thing and something I hear so much from all different age groups, even particularly the older demographic that I would work with quite a bit. My eyes are tired, or I can only read a page or two a night and they get sore, or we have bits of the eye and the colors or the words moving around on the page, and lots of different strategies and maybe short-term strategies that can be put in place for those type of fixes. But definitely to get that long-term gain is where you want to incorporate that physical literacy element and trying to bring that back up. And I suppose, Alweena, you would agree with this side that it's definitely a skill that can be, I suppose, developed and learned. So no matter what age you're at, it's something that can be developed, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't matter what age, because what happens is Mother Nature is very clever. So how do primitive reflexes get integrated? They get integrated via movement. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't say do it by when you're 5 years old or 45 years old. I worked with a woman who was coming up to 50 years old, dyslexic. We actually sorted out a physical literacy, and for the first time ever, she was able to. She started going to college at that age. So it was nothing to do with her brain. It was her physical literacy that can be impacted on. So as an adult, so when I was doing my own PhD, I was actually using the sequencing activities that are actually on the Simple Physical Literacy website right now, which are actually free because of the current climate we're in. You know, you can just go and download those. As an adult, I was doing the sequencing myself because whilst I was doing my PhD, I wanted to make sure that my physical literacy was maintained. So at any age, you can start at any age and see a massive improvement.
Yeah, really, really important. And even for, let's say, a parent or somebody that's a guardian, maybe of a child as well, even if they did it with them, you know, it definitely can be a kind of a fun, integrated activity for lots of people to do, whether, again, regardless of whether they've learning difficulties or not, it only has benefits. You know, it can't give you any negative outcomes. So it's definitely an activity, and all quite short as well, Alweena, aren't they? Like lots of different movements, quite snappy, can get them done quite quickly, or very conscious of people kind of time pressure sensitive, maybe going back to work and back to school in the coming season. So it's definitely something you can get done quite quickly, aren't they?
Absolutely. And you know, just the other element of this is, it's not in dyslexia we're really concerned about children learning and having access to information and being able to learn, but in the mental health aspect, the young teens who have reflexes that are retained, they are having issues. So it's this emotional element. So physical literacy impacts not only learning and being able to access the information, but actually your well-being, your sense, your mental health, your emotional being as well. So it's absolutely immense. If you just think of physical literacy as the precursor to literacy, you'll know the importance of it.
Yeah, really, really, really valuable and really great a range of insights. Any last bit of tips or any last bit of insights that you'd want to share with us today, Alweena? Anything coming to mind to finish off?
You know what? All I want to say is keep moving,
Yeah.
keep well.
Great.
And that's at any age.
Yeah, really, really important. The movement, so valuable for our bodies with all of our other core principles. So talk an awful lot about sleep and the food and regulating its body. So those aspects are really, really important in some of our other videos, but a movement side is essential, and correct forms of movement. I know there's probably no incorrect form of movement, but it's kind of particular type of movement that we're talking about. Yeah, particular type, not just, cardio or anything like that. It's a very different type of movement to help with the brain development. Great, Alweena, thank you so much. So lovely to have you on board today, and thank you for all your suggestions. As we mentioned, we'll put the links to Alweena's website in the comments below. If you have any further comments or follow-ups, feel free to get in touch with us, or you can contact Alweena as well directly on your website. Alweena, is that the best protocol or through your...
Yeah, go and have a look at simplephysicalliteracy.com.
Fabulous. Great. Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll speak to you soon.
All right. Thank you.